So, you want a huge colony of shrimp, eh? Well, the only way to do that is by setting up your tank the right way and by feeding the right foods at the right time. That's what we'll be covering in this video. As a quick heads up, this video is part 4 of our cherry shrimp crash course series where Rick and Adam discuss every aspect of keeping a healthy shrimp tank. After each video, we have live streams to dive even deeper into those topics and answer any questions you may have, so be sure to save these dates in your calendar. Now, on to the video. Shrimp are detritivores. They are looking for dead or dying things to help clean it up. That being said, in our tanks, we don't have many dead or dying things, and so they're mainly scavenging around for biofilm in the tank, which is this interesting microbial community of bacteria and fungi and other even larger microorganisms that are all growing on every surface in your tank. The more surface area you have, the more food you have available. That's part of why having a larger tank is better for shrimp keeping in general and why you can keep more shrimp in it, because you are going to have much more surface area to feed shrimp. But there are going to be times when you want to increase the amount of food going in, and so that's when you want to add supplemental foods. So there are a ton of different commercial foods available, different algae wafers, different pellets. All of those can work perfectly well. You can also add fresh food though, like blanched spinach, zucchini, boiled egg yolk, canned green beans, anything that's unsalted, washed, and safe for the tank. That's where organic foods can be really beneficial because they're generally going to have fewer pesticides or ones that can be more easily washed off. And so once you blanch everything to kill off any bacteria, those can be very safe to add. Adam, do you want to talk about what you add and why?
Yeah, so I typically add tons of green beans. That's kind of my food of choice for shrimp. Really, the big reason is because it's simple. You can buy French cut green beans, unsalted, fresh out of the can, and literally they go straight into the fish tank. The vitamins and the minerals are much more water stable in real foods that get blanched. They won't leach out all of the healthy parts into the water, which is something you need to be worried about with, pellet foods and flake foods and stuff like that. Additionally, I'm going to go a step further here to say, if you're feeding pellets or, flake foods or something to them or powders or whatever, usually there's protein in all of that, but a lot of times it's animal-based proteins. And so there actually is a ton of literature on the fact that shrimp need a lot of plant-based proteins due to the different lipid variabilities within those plant proteins and the availability of the protein to actually synthesize into anything useful for the shrimp. 30 to 40 adult hungry shrimp in a pretty much a bare bottom tank. That one piece of zucchini is still way more food than the 40 shrimp in that picture are going to be able to eat. If you just got a colony of 10 to 20 shrimp in the mail, one slice of zucchini is way more than they're going to eat in, a week probably. And I tend to let it sit longer. If you're really trying to breed, I'd say you can give it more like 8 to 12.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting hearing about the different approaches, especially from a breeding perspective, when you have a bunch of shrimp in the tank and you're doing consistent water changes. I think you're often doing about 2 large water changes a week, is that right?
Yeah, about 3 smaller ones a week, but yeah.
When you have that situation, it's obviously much safer to leave food in the tank. So along with your experience level, knowing exactly how much to add to ensure that you avoid water parameter issues, even if you do leave the food in for longer. So we have these rules, these guidelines. There are always points where you can break them if you understand what you're doing and why. Just be aware that this is why you may hear so much conflicting advice. So our takeaway here is to understand how it can apply to your system.
Even if you are experienced and you know what you're doing, watch what you're doing and pay attention. That's a message to me later, looking back on this after I screw something up in the future. Nobody really has it all dialed in. And as much as I try to pay attention to it, yeah, I've still crashed tanks, right? And it absolutely was because I put in too many green beans and I left to go to work the next morning before the lights turned on and I didn't slow down enough to look at it. Monitoring your tank, watching what's going on and paying attention to it is probably the most important part of this whole hobby.
Yeah, and the more you're trying to push your tank, the more you have to be aware of it and keep on it, keep up with maintenance, everything going on. It really depends on your goal. In general, when you're just getting your shrimp, you do not need to feed them. In a mature, healthy tank with brand new shrimp with 1 shrimp per gallon, there should be plenty of food in there. Once you've had them in there for a week or 2 at least, then you can maybe start feeding 1 to 2 times a week here. If you have a tank with less surface area, or if you're really trying to breed them, that's when you want to be starting to add a little bit more food, but in generally very small quantities so that it doesn't stick around in the tank and isn't constantly leaching nutrients into the water. To summarize kind of everything we've said, we have these feeding rules of thumb, and I have a link to an article on shrimpexplained.com that covers this a little bit more in depth. But rule number 1 is to always feed cautiously. If you're ever not sure how much to feed of something, feed less. Just feed like the smallest pinch, see how long it takes for your shrimp to eat it, because it will likely take a little bit longer than you think, unless your shrimp are absolutely ravenous, and you can always add more food. You can't always take it out. Rule number 2 is to only feed what your shrimp can eat in generally about 1 to 2 hours. It could go 3 hours depending on the type of food. There are some foods that are not soluble whatsoever, like soybean hulls, and those can last a very long time in the tank. Those can go up to like 12 hours or more, but in general, it's safer to take food out sooner rather than later. That's where a feeding dish, again, can help with that. Rule number 3 is that what goes in must come out. As we've been talking about with energy going into a system, it needs somewhere to go. And so it could go into shrimp growth, it could go into plant growth, or it can go into water changes. One of those things has to be happening, otherwise it is building up in your water, and then in that case you will need to do more water changes if you're feeding more. So just be sure that you're feeding consciously rather than automatically, and pay attention to your shrimp's behavior throughout this process.
Okay, so let's jump into some breeding basics here on Neocaridina shrimp. I think there's one big key part here. Less human interaction is always better. So treat them like you treat a garden. You have some daily chores to do, but don't transplant everything in your garden every day for no reason, right? That same methodology totally applies here to shrimp. So it's easy to get in there and want to make micro adjustments about big things all the time. You know, what if the driftwood is over here? And I'll just add another piece of driftwood, and they probably need catappa leaves today. And wow, they look hungry. Feed them double. Nothing is probably necessary in that capacity, right? Less human interaction is better. The best breeding I've ever done of shrimp has been when I was super busy during finals week and not paying attention to anything for like a month. As long as you're doing your standard maintenance, right? You still need to water the garden, right? You still need to feed your fish. You still need to do your water changes, right? You can't neglect them. But when you're in there less, it keeps them stable. A lot of breeding shrimp is just making sure that they're thriving and happy and well fed. They have enough energy to produce offspring, and then making sure once they do produce offspring and there's a bunch of shrimplets, that there's food for those shrimplets to eat as well. A couple of other things, just breeding basics, just kind of to make sure everybody's on the same page here. The way in which shrimp breed follows their molting cycle. So right before female shrimp are ready to molt, they release some hormone into the water that typically let males know what's about to go down, and the males get very excited. They'll swim around the tank very quickly. As they do so, the female shrimp gets ready to mate. They'll mate, and upon molting, she will move the eggs, which are usually in her saddle, which is on her back. She'll move them, and then they wind up looking buried once they have fertilized eggs that they're growing out underneath them. They carry eggs for 15 to 30 days, depending on temperature and metabolism. And so you can see this tool in here if you want to go estimate their hatching rate in your tank due to the temperature. Before molting the next time, she'll release a bunch of baby shrimp as shrimplets. You can see it here on the left. And they're very, 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 very small. As they grow up, they'll develop color, usually following molting cycles. So usually around that 3 to 4 month time where they're finally ready to breed on their own, they've kind of matured enough and developed their full adult colors. Like Rick said earlier, their colors will continue to evolve later in life, and you'll see darker pigments form, some discoloration can occur, some lightening in some areas can occur, and that back stripe can happen. That's very frequent on cherry shrimp. And so all of that's very expected. So just some more basics continued. The more hiding spots, the more baby shrimp you can have. The surface area is really the part that matters here. The bigger tank allows for a lot more surface area to be packed inside of there, and those are going to have a much higher bioload capacity. You can see here what I'm talking about. On the left, we have a bad example. This is a tank of mine while I was importing. So bare bottom, nothing in there, just a sponge filter. This is not a good tank to breed in. And you'll notice, especially on imported shrimp, you will not see juveniles. That's because the babies that do exist in this tank are never going to reach that adulthood because there's not enough life in this tank to support them. The middle ground is sort of your retail. This is a tank I put together for a local fish store near me with a whole bunch of shrimp in it. And the issue here is that although there's some hiding spots, the population of shrimp is far greater than the limited hiding spots it allows. This is great for retail, right? You need to catch them pretty easily, but doesn't make for a good breeding tank. The one on the right is a good breeding tank example. This is a top-down photo, so it's a little blurry. That's the water moving on top of the tank. You can just see that tank, though, super packed with plants. You can't see any substrate, and there's substrate on that whole tank. And so you're just creating tons of places for bacteria and algae to thrive that then get picked off by shrimp because they need to go around and forage. And all of the babies will need to go around and pick and forage too. You can supplement adult feeding by, power feeding, pellets or green beans. But those baby shrimp really do need that biofilm. Wherever they get, kind of scattered throughout the tank, they're not going to want to adventure way over to the other side where you fed them today. They want the food to be, readily available and all around. Rick, do you want to kind of build off this one?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add here, ideally in a breeder setup, if you are trying to hopefully sell those shrimp, then you need a way to get them out easily. So having some kind of floating moss or having like guppy grass or something along those lines, they provide the surface area, but then you can also take them out and then you clear out that area to then be able to easily dip in and net out the shrimp, because otherwise it can be a real pain if those are all planted. That's why those importers keep those really clear tanks, of course. Lastly, we have breeding issues. Adam, take it away.
Wonderful. So there is sort of one big flaw in breeding shrimp, and that if you look at the pictures here, you can see this colony of red shrimp within probably 3 years downbred to this thing on the right. And the thing on the right is still a Neocaridina shrimp. It's still cute, it's still fun, it's still thriving. However, it's absolutely the wrong color if you're caring about aesthetics or just visual appeal. It's called downbreeding, which is kind of a very negative term for it, but what is happening is your genetic line have some variability to them, and if you don't correct it, you'll wind up throwing really crazy stuff like that green spotted striped wild type shrimp. I've listened to a lot of different breeders, right? From show winners to mass production to the people in Asia that are doing it at crazy scale. I've learned as much as I could from all those different sources. And if I had to boil it down, the biggest reason people reset is simply to cull. Not for some production efficiency or something like that. After a couple of generations, you need to get in there with a fine-tooth comb and say, these are good and these are bad. And the only way to really do that at scale is to completely reset and really go through it. You can kind of do it if you go through and just pick out 50% of them, but genetics are clearly inherent to the actual organism. So if you just miss one that looks like the one on the right, you'll continue to downbreed that colony incredibly quickly. So you need to make sure you remove every single one that looks really wrong.
Great points. There are a few other, breeding issues that I think are worth talking about here. The first is that due to the selection process of especially imported shrimp, most likely, they tend to select for the largest shrimp, and those shrimp tend to be female. It is not uncommon for someone to get a batch of shrimp that is entirely female. And when that happens, you're not gonna have any breeding. There are quite a few signs that tell males and females apart. The first is the presence of eggs, either developing in the saddle in the upper middle of their body, or fertilized and carried in their swimmerets. If you see either of those, then you know that's a female shrimp. Females also tend to be larger and more colorful than males, but that depends on their life stage. A newborn female won't be as colorful as an adult male, but if you have two juveniles at the same age, or two adults, then you should see a clear difference in size, and often the females will be more covered in color. Another way to tell them apart is to look at their body shape. Males have a more angular abdomen, especially on the lower part, whereas females tend to have a more curved abdomen, since this gives them extra space to carry eggs. The curve doesn't really develop until after they have their first clutch of eggs, so this method is less reliable when they're younger. Since we often receive shrimp that are only a couple months old, it can be difficult to tell males and females apart, but these differences will become more obvious as they get older. There are a number of other small details that distinguish males and females, which are covered in our guide on the website if you'd like to take a look. Additionally, make sure you're giving your shrimp enough time. So they do need to molt before they can actually breed. And if you just got a shrimp that's probably 3-ish months old, it's just hitting its mature phase. So it may need to molt once when it gets into your tank. It'll start developing its ovaries, its saddle, and then it'll molt a second time, and that'll be when it's actually ready to breed. And that process could take 2 to 3 months, depending on when you got your shrimp. So for Neocaridina, give it about 3 months before you really start to make any changes to the tank. Just trying to let it stay stable, safe, healthy for them is going to be optimal here. After that point, would be when you might want to consider trying to feed different foods, maybe something with higher protein or higher cholesterol, like boiled egg yolk, trying to do fewer or more water changes, trying to make adjustments to see if you can get them to start breeding more effectively. So those are a couple other issues. Any last things you want to add on that end?
No, I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for the live stream, and bring your worst, right? Ask as many big questions as you can. We will go pretty deep into the weeds on some of this breeding stuff.
Perfect. The live stream date will be on the screen here, and that's when we'll be talking even more in depth about feeding and breeding. And you can have all your questions answered again and get to interact with us and any other members of the community. So we will look forward to see you then. There's one more video left in this series, and we will be covering other common issues, water quality problems, pests, parasites, and how to deal with those, because unfortunately they are extremely common in the hobby for a variety of reasons that we'll go over. This portion will also hopefully help you alleviate your concern, any panic, so that you know how to deal with them when they do happen. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and happy shrimping.